Douglas Jackman. This is Spiritual Perspectives, and I have I'm very honored to have Robert Waggoner, author of Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. I read this book a few years ago, and I loved it. It changed my entire perspective on things, especially what dreaming actually is and what it does. And so, Robert, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and give us your understanding kind of where you're coming from as far as big picture stuff, celestial beings, why we're here, and how lucid dreaming kind of fits into everything.
Yeah, so thanks for the invite. I taught myself how to lucid dream back in 1975, so I've been a long time lucid dreamer, and even now I continue to have lucid dreams. But you have to realize that back in 75, the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming hadn't emerged yet. And so I was kind of doing it on my own for 5 or 6 years until the scientific evidence came out around 1980 or 1981. What I realized about lucid dreaming, though, at first it was just fun. You fly around, you fly through walls, you walk on water, you just have fun, and it just seemed kind of like a playground for the mind. But then I kept going deeper and realized that, wow, in a lucid dream, you can actually interact with your unconscious mind. You can ignore the dream figures and ask a question of this inner awareness that will respond sometimes with a voice. Sometimes it'll respond by showing a whole new lucid dream. And so I just kept going deeper and realized that, wow, there's a lot more to lucid dreaming than I ever realized. And so one thing that's, I think, really important to understand is that lucid dreaming has a spiritual background that goes way deep. So for 2,000 years, it's been part of Buddhist dream yoga. For 1,000 years, it's been part of Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam. And so lucid dreaming just goes so profoundly deep. It's even been part of shamanic and native traditions for many thousands of years. So there's a lot to learn about lucid dreaming, and that's why I decided to write a couple books on it, just to open up the potential of lucid dreaming and also to help people see the different techniques that I use to keep going deeper.
Yeah, you kind of cut your teeth the same way I did on the whole spiritual thing with Carlos Castaneda. I remember, although I wish I would have taken your tack. I remember reading the Art of Dreaming, and I read all those books. I read them all. But I remember lucid dreaming one time on myself and just rolling out of bed, and it was like, well, what's this? And so I just forgot about it until I read your books. And then it's like, wow, there is just so much more to this.
Right.
The one thing now, you just touched on a couple of those things that I think are incredibly profound. But the idea that dreams are just some kind of subconscious manifestation doesn't necessarily seem to fit. When I thought of lucid dreams, that's the way I would think about them, as they were just some kind of subconscious stuff, and you would just, if you got lucid, you would just be able to look at them like a movie. But after reading your book, it's almost like they're a Netflix movie that you check out, and that there's a hierarchy that actually is in charge of these things. And not only can you observe them, but they're malleable. They're malleable, and there are dream figures in them that seem like they are not just parts of your subconscious, but they actually are sentient beings. Why don't you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, that's one thing I try to get across in the book is all dream figures are not created equal. Because like you say, we grow up with kind of a Western view of dreaming that all those dream figures they're just projections of yourself. Well, that might account for 90% or 95%, but as you go deeper into lucid dreaming, you'll uncover some dream figures that seem something beyond thought forms or just projections of your mind. probably the first one that most lucid dreamers engage is a deceased dream figure. So, you know, it might be a deceased parent, a deceased friend, a deceased loved one. But oftentimes you become lucid when you see that deceased person and you go, wait a second, they've been dead, you know, 3 years now, 5 years now. What are they doing here? This has to be a dream. And oftentimes in that moment, that's when you have to be really careful, I'd say, because if you're of one mind or one belief system, you'll just ignore them and just walk away. But what I encourage people to do is to be more engaged and just go up and say, hey, what are you doing here? And oftentimes you'll find that that the deceased dream figure has something to tell you, that it's in your lucid dream for a particular reason. And so that's why I'm, you know, as you begin to look at dream figures, there's deceased dream figures. Sometimes you'll meet what I call independent agents, dream figures who actually seem to be aware and intentional and seem to know more about the dream than you actually know, which is always wild. And then sometimes you'll meet what I'd consider kind of spiritual dream figures. So there's a whole certain hierarchy here of dream figures that you can encounter. But for the most part, I think of them as projections of my mind until I've had a chance to talk to them. Because how they respond kind of shows where their head's at. And if they're unable to respond at all, then it shows that they're kind of empty or hollow, or they're just projections of my mind and don't really have anything to say.
So another aspect of this whole idea of the dream as not just being part of your own subconscious. You talk about actually meeting up with other lucid dreamers, and that other lucid dreamers do this, and you can independently verify this. I remember reading in another book talking about Tibetan yogis. Sometimes they'll go on retreat for a long time, and they have to communicate with their hierarchs or their teachers, and they do that in their dreams. So give us a little bit about that, because I know that you meet up with other lucid dreamers in your dreams sometimes.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So one thing I do want to say, if I was a beginning lucid dreamer, I would not make that my first goal to achieve, because I would wait until you have 15 or 20 years of lucid dreaming in your back pocket before you try, to have mutual dream experiences. But as it turned out, I joined an organization, the International Association for the Study of Dreams, and there I met some really great lucid dreamers. One of them was Linda Magillon. She wrote a book called Mutual Dreaming, which she shares her thoughts on dreams where people seem to either meet or the information meshes and they pass on information to each other. But she and I and our friend Ed Kellogg decided to conduct some mutual lucid dream experiments where we decided on certain nights that we would try to meet up in the lucid dream state. And in the morning, we would send our dream reports to a fair witness. We wouldn't send them to each other, we'd send them to another person. And if we did happen to meet up, we were supposed to pass on a secret code word and also make a certain kind of gesture. We all had our own unique gestures to make. The results were really interesting. But here's what happens sometimes. Sometimes Ed might find himself lucidly aware, but he finds himself in my living room, and I interact with him in such a way that he can guess my code word, but in my dream, I'm not actually lucid. I'm just hanging out. And so it was interesting to see some of these experiments go that one person gets lucid, but the other person isn't lucid, but still is kind of doing the experiment. And then there were some cases, Ed and Linda becoming lucidly aware. There was a case of Ed and I becoming lucidly aware. What was funny about it and what was evidential about it, at least for me, we both described in our dream report the same sort of dream. I called it a lake and Ed called it a river and all, but we talked about meeting up. And what was funny, Ed carried 2-gallon jugs of water. And so I thought in the lucid dream, I thought that's kind of weird to be carrying around two-gallon jugs of water in each hand. And in the morning, I remember asking him, why would you carry water like that? And he said that in his waking life, he was doing an experiment where he was trying to drink 2 gallons of water a day to see if that would influence his body and his physiology, his health. And so, sometimes when you have those kind of things cross over, that's when you realize that you've learned something that you didn't know. And that kind of gives you the sense that there was a meetup in the dream state and information was passed on.
Cool. Talk to us a little bit about this whole idea of talking to I'll call it the hierarchy of the dream. I forgot what you called it, but you can actually address the dream itself and the dream will answer you.
Right. So back in 1983, I joined a Lucid Dream Explorers group where every month we had a goal to achieve, a monthly goal in our lucid dreams. And one month it was find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent. So I became lucidly aware, followed a woman into an office. Now I see there's 3 women inside this office and a gentleman in a 3-piece suit. And I go up to the gentleman and he's an older guy. And I just ask him, excuse me, what do you represent? And so at that moment, I thought that he would just tell me, he would just, say what he represents. But instead, there was a voice boomed out a partial response from above him. And so I look up and I said, blah, 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 what? And it's like the voice had to think for a half second, then it expressed exactly what the guy represented and answered my question. So I decided to wake up and write it down before I forgot about it. But in the morning, I thought, wait a second, what was this voice, this non-visible voice that responded to my question? And so after that, I began a whole series of experiments where I would ignore the dream figures and just shout out a question to this inner awareness, like, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And then sometimes the entire lucid dream would change, or sometimes just one thing would appear. But it was always something important. And so I began to explore with this. I would ask to experience concepts and just have my mind blown. And so I began to tell friends and others, that I was having this experience, and they began to have the same sort of experiment where they would interact with this intelligent awareness. And so in my book, my first book, that's why I call it Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. I think that lucid dreaming gives us the capacity to engage an inner awareness. And it was interesting that it was like 8 years after that, Carlos Castaneda came out with The Art of Dreaming. And in that book, he asked Don Juan, he says, what's this non-visible voice that replies to me when I ask questions? And Don Juan says, I call that the dreaming emissary. It'll always tell you the truth. And he goes on and on about the dreaming emissary. But what blows my mind is everyone said Castaneda was a fraud. But I thought, if he came out with that, in 1993, The Art of Dreaming, and obviously he had written the book in 91 or 92 before it got published, that he obviously had some awareness of being aware within a lucid dream, interacting with this non-visible awareness and all of that, because at that time, there still wasn't that many people talking about engaging this inner awareness and having conversations.
So talk to me a little bit about, I guess you call it crossover, the expertise or the mastery you gain in dreaming. Sometimes if you get to a point where you've been doing it for a long time, it can actually cross over. You described one point where you were in a canyon. I think it was Arizona Grand Canyon, someplace where all of a sudden you ask, instead of not asking the dream emissary, the dream hierarch, you just ask the canyon a question, and it replied back to you.
Right. I'm just going to preface this a little bit to say that a lot of lucid dreamers have discovered that you can build up a skill in the lucid dream state and it'll transfer or cross over to the waking state. And so in Germany, like 9% of the professional athletes who lucid dream, they practice their athletic skills in the lucid dream state and find that they become better athletes in the waking state. And a lot of us who have done meditations or meditating in lucid dreams, we find if we do that 4 or 5 times in a lucid dream, then in the waking state, all of a sudden we just go so deep, so quick in meditating because we've done it in lucid dreams and it's like we've cleared out the path. And so I think part of this interacting with the larger awareness, this non-visible awareness, and asking it questions, you begin to realize that all of us have an inner self, that, you know, no matter who we are, we all there's a part of us that's connected to the interface of our reality. And so in my first book, I tell the story of my wife and I went on a trip down the Grand Canyon. And so you're on a raft for 7 days and you sleep out under the stars and all that. And so I'm a former Boy Scout. I just love all that stuff. Being out in nature is great. But what happens is, because you can't get any cell phone service and all, you just become a natural person again. You know, you're not in an artificial reality. You're really out in nature 24/7. And so we stopped where Havasu Canyon Falls is, about 3 days into the trip. And I do want to say I was having lucid dreams almost every night there in the Grand Canyon, that it was just profound what my dreams were like. But this is during the day now, so we pulled a Havasu Canyon Creek. We get out of the boat and the boat people tell us, oh, you got to go up the trail about a mile and then cross over and another half mile. You get to these beautiful falls. And so my wife and I, we go to the first mile and get down into the creek. And so you have to imagine that in August, it's like, 95 degrees outside, but this water is so, 78 degrees or whatever. It's cool and refreshing and silky. And so I get in a real meditative state and I just reach out to the canyon, because by this time in my life, I'd realized that all things have an awareness. And I asked the canyon, I said, Canyon, what do you have to say to me? And just as clear as day, I heard a voice say, get out while you still can. And I looked up and I thought, what? And at first I thought, I thought my mind was just playing a trick on me, or, maybe I was sitting on a aquatic plant or something. And so I just kind of ignored it. Got back into a meditative state about 5 minutes later, and I reached out again. So Canyon, what do you have to say to me? And this time it was more insistent. It said, get out while you still can. And I stood up in the stream and I told my wife and the other people there, I said, well, we got to get out of here. We got to get back to the boat. And they said, why? This is heaven. This is great. And I said, there's something wrong here. We got to get out. And all of a sudden, so you have to realize that you're kind of you're not in a total slot canyon, but you're in a very steep canyon. And suddenly I could see up there just the tiny blackness of a thunder cloud, thunderhead. And I knew there was going to be a flash flood. And in this creek, lots of people have died in flash floods in this creek. A number of people have died of. And so as soon as I pointed out to people, hey, you see that little sliver of black? That means a thunderstorm's coming. We got to get out of here before there's a flash flood. So we climb up, you had to go up about 10 feet before you even got on the trail. And by that time, the boat crew was coming down the trail just screaming, get back to the boat. There's going to be a flash flood. Get back to the boat. And so thankfully, everyone from our boat got back and all. And then the heavens opened up. And it's just so wild because in the Grand Canyon, there's no soil to stop the water. And so all of a sudden you see like 1,000 waterfalls coming from every cliff, everywhere for the next 10 miles, just, waterfall after waterfall. But I really realized that, everything is conscious and aware. And that's something that I learned by virtue of lucid dreaming. The Buddhist in Buddhist Dream Yoga Monastery, one of the first lessons is all this a dream. And what they mean by that isn't that all this is a fantasy or an illusion. What they mean is that all of this is kind of a creation of the mind along with our larger awareness, kind of helping to create personal experience. And so when you realize that you kind of exist in that creation, sometimes you can reach out to it and always ask an open-ended question like, what's going on here, or something like that. And then sometimes it'll come to you that there's something more going on than what you're consciously aware of.
That's great. Yeah, one of the organization that I'm part of is we actually call to celestial beings, and then we do chants in English to kind of make that happen. One thing that I was really kind of almost blown away when you talked about in the dreams, sometimes like for healing, you will do these chants in English and create chi and actually direct that energy into healing. Generally, I guess it works better for yourself, but you can also direct it to others.
Yeah, it's interesting, this whole idea of healing. Lucid dreaming is already used to help people heal from recurring nightmares that they have in post-traumatic stress disorder. That's one of the big problems with PTSD is people have nightmares all the time. They don't want to fall asleep anymore, or they can't fall asleep because they're so afraid and they have to drink themselves asleep or something like that. So lucid dreaming is already used to help people heal from recurring nightmares. But my friend Ed Kellogg, I mentioned, he kind of got into investigating, could you use lucid dreaming for physical healing? And one time he was eating a shish kebab and punctured his tonsil. He was so enthusiastic. And so his tonsil became infected, and he decided to try to have an out-of-body or maybe a lucid dream to try to heal himself. And so he became lucidly aware. He directed healing energy to his throat. And he said when he woke up, I think like 80 or 90% of the pain was gone. Within a couple hours, the red lines, the infection that was showing up on the sides of his face or his neck disappeared. And he said he was just really stunned to realize that in a lucid dream, you could project healing energy to your physical body and really have a rapid manifestation. And since that time, in my book, I've shared a lot of ideas on how to go about this. Sometimes people will create a ball of healing light, and put it on their bad shoulder or whatever. And then the next day they're stunned that they can use their arm and shoulder and all the pain's gone away. People have used it for issues that, medical science really couldn't heal them. Like a guy had GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disorder. In 2 lucid dreams, he intended for his gut to be healed because the doctors and all the medicine just hadn't been able to make any difference. And he said after the second lucid dream, he realized that something profound had happened, and he realized that his GERD was healed. And I talked to him like 7 years later, and he said the GERD was still healed. He said it was really wild that finally his doctor had figured out why he ever developed it. But even though his doctor figured out why it had occurred, ever since the lucid dreams, it was still healed. And so in the magazine that I helped create, the Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine, every now and then we'll get submissions, lucid dream submissions of people who managed to heal themselves in the lucid dream state. So I think this is really an area where you can really imagine even science doing some scientific studies on, because there's some things, there's like some skin ailments that there's not any really cure for. And imagine teaching people how to become lucidly aware in their dream and how to project healing energy in the lucid dream and heal themselves. But to what you were getting to, what I've found is some of the people who've read my book are Reiki healers who use these Japanese mantras to help heal in the waking state. But sometimes in the lucid dream state, they decide to do the same thing. They'll do their chants, or they'll project energy towards someone they know who needs healing assistance. And some of them have reported some really profound changes. But one woman who surprised me, she's from Germany. She said when she first did it and started doing her Reiki chant, she said a Japanese woman suddenly appeared in her lucid dream and told her that she was mispronouncing some of the words, and then corrected her on the proper pronunciation of these words. And of course, Reiki is a Japanese Buddhist healing approach. So anyway, it's kind of wild to wonder about that, but I think there's really a great future in healing in lucid dreams.
Cool. Another spiritual aspect that I thought was kind of cool is a lot of times in the any kind of spiritual organizations or philosophies, they'll say to bring something into manifestation, you really have to accept, you have to just believe that it's going to happen for it to happen. And I remember one thing that typified that in the dream state where you talked about, I guess you were flying and you saw a wall and you said, I'm just going to go through that wall. But you said there was an increment of doubt, and then you went through it and you just got stuck.
Right. That I think this is one of the most important things that I learned in the first 5 or 10 years of lucid dreaming is that your beliefs and expectations really matter, because they get reflected and projected out there. And so like you were saying, at first I became lucidly aware in this theater, and I decided I was going to go exploring. And so that time I flew through the wall expecting, not to have any trouble, and just flew right through. And so I go out exploring this kind of college campus area, and then I decide to come back to where the whole lucid dream began. And as I'm coming on the other side, well, gosh, now those bricks look really thick and heavy and solid. And right as I come up to fly through them, I had this moment of doubt that, oh, this is going to be tough. And I get stuck, halfway through the wall. And then I realized how stupid that was, to be stuck halfway through a wall. I mean, you're either in or out. And so then I just wiggled my way through. But what it shows is that your beliefs and expectations are kind of an energy that get projected out there. And so I tell people a lot of times you'll see this even in how you relate to a dream figure. Like if you see a dream figure in a black coat and think that, oh, you're going to have a problem with this dream figure, then all of a sudden they'll turn around and they'll have a knife or something. But if you see that same dream figure in a black coat and think, oh, that looks like maybe a priest, then they'll turn around and they'll, have a crucifix on and carrying a Bible or something. So it's like your mind helps determine what it's going to be here by its beliefs and expectations. And that's why a lot of times when people tell me about the troubles that they're having in lucid dreams, oftentimes I'll point to them how it reflects the belief they have. Like if you believe that you can only fly 6 feet high, then you can only fly 6 feet high. But when you change your belief and think, oh, gravity doesn't exist in the lucid dream state, then you can fly like Superman. But you got to flip that belief. And it's the same thing we see in the waking state. Your beliefs and expectations matter. In fact, I use this understanding to help heal myself of hay fever. Every August and September here, I'd have horrible hay fever for about 2 months. I could barely breathe. I was sneezing all the time. My throat was all swelled up. It was really just a nightmare. But then I told myself, well, wait a second. If I'm really creating my reality here, then I should be able to change this. And so this is what I did. It was really simple. Every time I began to think about hay fever or August and September being horrible, first I became aware of it. So you got to become mindful of what your head is doing. So I became aware of it. Then I told myself, no, not this year. So I stopped it. Then the third thing, I told myself what I wanted to experience. I said, this year, I'll breathe easily and naturally. So become aware of what you're telling yourself, stop it, and then tell yourself where you want to go. This year, I'll breathe easily and naturally. And I'll tell you that first year doing this in the waking state, the first year my symptoms decreased about 70%. The next year they decreased 90%. The next year 95%. And then I stopped thinking about it. I didn't have hay fever anymore. I breathe easily and naturally. But that's the thing. A lot of times people, oh, become aware of your beliefs, and oh, if a bad belief, negative belief comes up, stop it. That's just number two of the three-part equation. You got to tell yourself where you want to go. It's like going to Uber and say, "Get me out of here," and Uber says, "Where you want to go? Get me out of here. Where you want to go? Get me out of here. Where you want to go?" You're not going to go anywhere if you just, you've got to give your unconscious mind the goal of where you want to go to. And you see it in lucid dreaming, and you also see it in the waking state as well. And so again, that's one thing that I think you begin to learn as a lucid dreamer, is that no matter where you find yourself, dreams, lucid dreams, waking, after death state, your beliefs and expectations matter. Your mind is helping to create the experience that you're perceiving along with your inner awareness. And so you really got to learn how to use your mind in order to make lucid dreaming work, in order to make waking reality work, in order to make any experienced reality work. And so that manifesting thing was really important to see how important beliefs and expectations are. Also, the importance of your intent, and even the importance of your wording, how you word things, word your manifestation. It really matters that you pick the exact right words.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. I remember in the book, because generally in the whole spiritual thing, and also with lucid dreaming, your intent is a huge part of it. But
Exactly.
but it's not just intent. You gave the example of this guy who was an artist. I'm a little bit hazy on the story,
Yeah.
but the guy he wanted to be able to see lucid pictures, to be able to bring them back.
Right.
But he did not specify. He worded his request in too vague a manner, so he didn't get what he wanted.
Yeah. So there's this artist. He would become lucidly aware, and then he'd announce, "Now let me look for art that I can create." And like you say, he wanted to see art that he could see in the lucid dream, and then he could memorize it, then he could wake up and do that kind of art. What would happen is he would spend the whole time looking for art to create. And then he realized one day he wasn't having any success with this. And then he realized, oh, it's because of what I'm expressing. And so the next lucid dream, he said, "Now let me look at art that I can create." And he said, suddenly art began to appear on the walls all over the place. And just by changing it from "now let me look for art that I can create" to "now let me look at art I can create," just that one prepositional change, all of a sudden he was looking at art all over the place. And he also said that it was funny that he would go to shows and his lucid dream art was always the first thing to sell. He said sometimes it was the most simple stuff, and he would think there's no way anyone's going to want to buy that, and people would come up and, oh, they had to have that artwork. But you're right, it was just that one change in how he worded things. And so sometimes I'll see that when people will write me, they'll read my book, they'll stop in a lucid dream and announce a request or something. But sometimes in that request, it's worded awkwardly so that it's not clear. Their intent isn't well honed, and so they don't get any response. And sometimes just by changing the wording a little bit, all of a sudden the response comes forward.
So, talk to us a little bit about dream figures and symbols as a way of resolving things. When you have these symbols or dream figures that approach you or become part of your dream, it seems like there's an opportunity to find out what they're trying to tell you.
Right. So again, all dream figures are not created equal, and that's really an important point to get across. One thing that I learned by interacting with people like Ed Kellogg and others is that sometimes in a lucid dream, if you have an aggressive dream figure, instead of fighting it or running away, it's a dream figure, it's your lucid dream. Even though it's aggressive and angry or hateful or whatever, you should send it what it lacks. Send it the opposite of what it's expressing. Like one time I became lucidly aware, and there's this big, angry Rottweiler, just 3 feet away from my face, just growling at me. Looks like it's going to bite my head off. But I'm thinking, wait a second, this is my lucid dream. What's going on here? And so I began to send that dog love and compassion and understanding. And all of a sudden, it began to shrink. It got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then it turned into a dachshund, a little wiener dog like we had when I was a kid. And I picked it up and we went flying around the lucid dream. So this is one thing I've realized about dream figures. If you send them certain energy, like love, understanding, compassion, then oftentimes an angry, aggressive dream figure will change. It'll become, a little kid who just wants a hug or something like that. And so you can use dream figures, this kind of activity, to resolve issues. Probably the most profound one that occurred to me, a guy came up to me, I was giving a talk in Seattle, and he told me that he grew up in a totally dysfunctional family. They were always fighting and all sorts of crap going on. But he said what happened is, as a little kid, he learned how to lucid dream because he always had nightmares all the time. And so he just kept having nightmares and nightmares and nightmares, and he got an engineering degree, still having nightmares. He'd either pulverize the dream figures or they'd chase him the entire, dream. Then he reads my book, and I'm saying, don't respond to angry, aggressive dream figures like that. Send them love, send them compassion, ask them, what do you represent? Who are you? Find out who they are. This guy said he began to do that in all of his lucid dreams, and within 6 months, he said the whole family dynamic in his family changed. Everyone was nice to each other now. They were respectful. They tolerated different opinions. They weren't having constant arguments. He said his life at work changed. His work colleagues started to treat him better and with greater respect. And he said the only thing he was doing different in his lucid dreams, he was making peace with all these aggressive dream figures. So again, sometimes you resolve the issues without even understanding you're resolving the issue. You don't know, there's a lot of aggressive dream figures out there. You can ask them, who are you or what do you represent? And sometimes you'll learn. But sometimes just sending them love and compassion is the other way of just resolving whatever that energy is all about. You can get it resolved and taken care of in the inner realm.
Cool. Just a couple more questions here. Another thing that you talk about is that sometimes in lucid dreaming, you can actually go beyond the lucid dream. And you've experienced things where you've gone into like universal consciousness and universal bliss or becoming a sound, things that are not generally associated with dreams.
Yeah, this was something that occurred about 20 years into lucid dreaming. So I began to realize that, a lucid dream is a co-creation of my conscious awareness along with this inner awareness, helping to create my perceived experience. And I realized, dreams like that. And gosh, even waking life is kind of a co-creation of myself and my larger awareness and my beliefs and expectation and focus and intent. And that's when I began to think, is there really a real reality? Because all these perceived realities that I'm experiencing, they're all mediated by my beliefs and my mindset. So if you took away all that, then is that the way you get to a real reality? And when I began to think like that, all of a sudden I would fall asleep at night and the entire night would be nothing but blue light. And I remember the first time it happened, I woke up and I thought, what was that? All night there, what do I put in my dream journal? Blue light? There's no me, no action, no symbols, no anything, just blue light the entire night. And so this was happening, every few nights. I'd have a night of blue light. And one morning I went down to the breakfast table and my wife said, what's happening to you? And I asked her why she would ask me that question, at 7:30 in the morning. She said, last night I saw your face and I've never seen someone in such bliss before. What's going on with you? And I said, well, I'm actually kind of trying to understand the actual nature of reality, and I'm having some pretty wild experiences. And I'll tell you, it was really wild to have these experiences. Then that went on, and some more kind of wild experiences happened. And then one night I'm falling asleep, and my inner awareness tells me, if you want to go the entire distance, you might cease to be. And I told my inner self, I said, look, I realize that this Robert guy is just a small fragment of a larger awareness. I allow, this Robert self to cease to be. I need to understand, because otherwise I'm just going to think this is all just some weird tragicomedy I'm involved in. And so that night, and this is hard to explain because we have a dualistic language, but that night, imagine being the light of awareness. And now the light of awareness is aware within awareness. So awareness, aware within awareness. So this experience occurs, and then it stops just instantly. And there's a guy in a robe, and I asked him, I said, what was that? Was that a lucid dream? And he said, oh no, to enter a lucid dream, go here. And so I step into the space that he points to, and I go boom right through a tunnel of light into a lucid dream. But in the morning, I thought, what was that first part, that light of awareness, aware? And it wasn't until 3 years later I heard Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, a Buddhist dream yoga head who wrote the book, The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep. And he said the ultimate goal of dream yoga is the awareness of clear light by awareness itself. And I thought, oh my God, there's a name for this. It just totally blew my mind. But I kind of realized that I'd kind of bushwhacked my way onto kind of this Buddhist dream yoga path without really understanding it on a conscious level. Later on, I realized that there were some things that were going on in my dreams, like there was this Asian guy who would appear, once a year or so, and tell me, "Oh, you're doing well. You did so well in the last night's dream. Keep going, keep going." And I was thinking, who is this guy? But then later, I realized that this guy was actually the head of a Buddhist lineage, and so. It's truly, this is how deep lucid dreaming can be. It can really take you places that you never suspected. And like you say, even going beyond lucid dreaming to understand what's there.
That is awesome. So the first thing I would say, if people don't know anything about lucid dreaming, they should absolutely get your book. I do my listening on, I do my books on Audible now. I mean, it is just great. But do you have anything that you would like to say if someone said, well, wow, yeah, I want to kind of get started with that, what should I do?
Yeah, so one thing you have to get into the habit of is building up your dream recall. A lot of us, the first thing we do when we wake up in the middle of the night is we look at our phone, see if there's any messages or anything like that. And you can't do that. The first thing you got to do when you wake up in the middle of the night is think, what was I just dreaming? And it helps to start to create a dream journal so you have good dream recall. But then in my second book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, that I co-authored with Carolyn McCready, we give our simple techniques on how to, get on the lucid dreaming path. Just because you have a lucid dream doesn't mean all your dreams are going to be lucid thereafter. You might have 2 a month, then you might have 4 a month, you might have 6 a month. It's kind of a process. But I do have to say that for a lot of people, lucid dreams have been some of the most profound experiences in their life. And so that's what I think is so incredible about lucid dreaming. Whether it's emotional healing or physical healing or accessing creativity or engaging this larger awareness or meditating within a lucid dream, it's an open platform for you to experience whatever you want to go for. And so that's why I think lucid dreaming has such a great future for a person, especially a person who is trying to go deeper spiritually.
God bless you. Thank you so much. That was great. Your book's available on Amazon, probably Barnes and Noble. I got it on Audible, so yeah, it's definitely recommended by me. And you got high recommendations also. You got, like, I don't know, 5 stars on for most people. So
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of my gift to the world. I've gone so deep into lucid dreaming. I thought I just want to expand and show people what's possible. And I've had people from all around the world write me and just thank me for just kind of opening their eyes to how you go about the deeper aspects of lucid dreaming. So thanks so much for having me on, Douglas. It's been a pleasure.
oh, thank you so much. Okay, take care and talk to you on the next time.
Okay.
Bye bye.